Welcome back to Adventure Pete. Thanks for joining us. So if this is your first time here, make sure you like the video, comment, tell us what you think, tell us what else you want to hear about, and subscribe. We got a lot of great content coming, and we got a lot of great content on the channel, so be sure to check it out. So today, we're looking at filling a void in our life. This one here specifically. This truck we bought off the lot, so it did not have a second battery kit on it. So here we are, and show you how to install one. So I'm going to have to apologize for the wind noise in advance. It's a very windy day, but here we are. We're going to make it happen. First thing we did is we started with all the factory parts to make this as factory as we can, because this is a brand new truck. We want it to be as factory as possible it can be. So we got the battery. We got the fuse box covered because it does take a secondary fuse box on that battery itself. We got the hold downs. We got the battery bolts to go with it. We got ground cables and all that fun stuff. And then we got the crossover harness. So the new harness that goes between the primary battery and the secondary battery, because there is a difference in the primary and secondary battery harness. So we did do our homework and started doing some legwork and digging. They do have factory connectors to tie into the factory harness. The problem we ran into was if the truck was not built with a secondary battery, we found that the engine harness was different because it came down to this connector right here. It was looking for a input signal from keyed on ignition to activate the second battery and tie in with the truck. So you can see right here, this is the fuse box that would be on a standard gasoline engine secondary battery. You have the 100 amp fuse right here as your primary fuse for input power. And then you have your 30 amp fuse right here. This relay is what combines and ties everything together on your main battery stud. So ideally, when power is inputted, that allows that relay to activate, and this will send power from the primary battery to the secondary battery. And this 30 amp fuse here was meant to be for auxiliary power, or in these applications, it was really just the trailer plug power harness. So if you shut the truck off and left it hooked up to a camper, it wasn't going to draw your starting battery dead. It would just draw your secondary battery dead. So when you started, you still had your main primary power. So I didn't really want to buy a brand new engine harness, which is like $800-900. I did actually call the dealership and dig into this problem. They said, yeah, no, that's what it takes. We had a guy go through the same process that I did. So I could tie into the battery directly, but it'd be nice to have a fuse to make it look as factory as possible because we are going to put a plow on this truck. So this wasn't exactly what I was looking for in a 100 amp fuse, which means I'm using a small wire. I'm not really gaining anything by having a second battery there. And if I tied it in, just ran power into the harness and just made it work as it was from the factory and just tied into a keyed ignition source, it's just kind of a battery that's just hanging out. All my work is being done with a primary battery, so a secondary battery really isn't benefiting me in any certain way. So I went a step further and I looked into the diesel secondary battery fuse box, because in a diesel engine, both batteries are tied together all the time to give you more power for starting that big diesel engine. On a diesel fuse block, you still have your standard battery hookup. You no longer have this relay on the box itself, but now we have a 175 amp fuse and a 400 amp fuse, which works out pretty darn nice because I can use my 175 amp fuse as my connector in between the two. It's powered on all the time. And then I can use this 400 amp fuse as my plow power feed. So I decided to go with a standard L5P fuse block just to have the batteries tied in all together all the time because I can manage my power supply. I can understand how that works. And that's how I originally wanted it to be working anyway. So that's why I went with that. So we actually don't need this harness right here. All we need to go with is a 2 gauge 6-foot harness to go between battery to battery and a fuse to go with it. So I'll show you how that all works right now. First thing to do is put the battery in. So it goes right in there. You can see that there's a little tang down there that the battery pushes up against, and then right there as well. So that's where it goes up, so it's nice in the pocket. And then our battery strap will lay across the top, bolt right there, and then bolt right there. So far, quick and easy. And this is what it looks like with the strap installed. Bolt there, 13 millimeter socket, does the job. Tie it in there, nice and tight. Wiggle test, it's nice and secure. And on to the next step. So the next thing we're going to do is attach the ground strap right here. You just take this cover, just kind of pop it off and out of the way. It gets out of there. So now we have our battery strap. Ground cable goes there. It actually goes up and pops right in there. And then we attach the ground stud here. We have our bolt that goes in the hole that's right there. So the note with that hole is sometimes it's not threaded. So you can take your bolt. It is actually a self-threading bolt. You can ram it through there and tap it that way, or you can run a tap through beforehand and tap it out. And that's how you attach the ground strap. I like to take a wire brush, clean out that hole beforehand to make sure there's no paint on there so we get a good ground connection. As you can see, ground strap is installed right there. Nice and easy. 13mm socket with an extension gets you up nice and high. And then 10mm right there. Tightens it up on the post. So one cable down, one to go. The positive cover comes off just like the ground. Just kind of pick it up and pull it right off. This is the fuse box for the diesel truck. Simply just sits down there. Kind of clips on the edge. So it clips right on to that there. So it actually is secure to the battery. We've got a 10mm stud right there to lock in on the battery post. Then this one right here is floating. So we do need to lock that one down. You can see how it's loose. We do need to lock that one down onto the plate to make sure it all lines up properly and have a good secure connection. So here we are at the passenger side looking at this fuse box. Now we need to tie in from fuse box to fuse box. Looking over here, we could tie into one of these ports over here that are currently being used, and that wouldn't be a big deal because this is a 400 amp one right there. We got a 175, we got a 250. We can tie in any one of these, but they are being used. We have a 100 amp and an 80 amp, so you could use it right there. And if we had the 100 amp and still use the gasoline version of that secondary fuse box, we could easily tie in right there and go that route. So I'll show you what we do. This kit right here is the solution. This kit comes, if you get an upfitter switch kit, it already comes installed. If you get a plow prep kit, it comes with that plow prep solenoid and relay system as well. What it does is it gives us an extra port right here for big high amp stuff. It will give us a bridge to tie in right here. So we just install that bridge, and I am going to tie my second battery in right here through that comm so I can use and keep those the way they are. And that allows me some flexibility for future add-ons because we will add on a upfitter switch kit here in the near future. So what we have here is everything we need. We've got the fuse for the plow. Obviously a 200 amp is going to be a little too tall for us. So it could be done, but I bought a 175 amp just to go with it. So it's matched on both sides to keep it even so we don't have imbalance of power. That 60 amp fuse is for the upfitter switch. This goes with if you wanted to make your own battery cable end to go with that fuse block. We have the bridge. We have the T-nuts that go to make the extra studs for us to go with. And then we have the hardware for installing and going with all the nuts. The way to install the T-nuts is simply just push it in there, install it, slide on through it. Goes through a little snug, but it will lock into place. Same for this side. Just goes through, locks in until it's snug in place. So now that we have them all snapped in right there, we have our bridge that goes in just like that. And then we have this little odd shaped thing right here. This is a spacer that goes on right here to make sure that that second fuse is spaced up high enough to go with the bridge height so you don't have an imbalance in an bent area. So now we just simply start putting it together. We have our 60 right here. We're going to throw that on too because we're going to use that eventually. We got our 175 goes right there. This fancy looking weird thing is that meant to go right there so you can add in and make your own battery cable connection so it's actually more of a custom and perfect fit. And then we have all our nuts we're going to spin down and tighten up. So that's how you do that for the plow prep kit. That is for the upfitter kit, and this is how you use it for adding in a second battery. You could always use this 60 amp fuse for something else. You can change it out for smaller fuses because those are universal, so you can go and change them out for any kind of upgrade thing or anything you want to use for in the future. So now, since we're using a normal standard battery cable end, it will not fit on that post. So right down here, that plastic tab, that lower stud right there, and this plastic tab we're going to have to trim off because we're not going to reuse the one that comes with the kit that has that weird connection, because I usually just like to have better crimps. So we're just going to cut that all out to keep it standard. So if I change it up down the road, I don't have to do any extra work. Trimmed and done. Not super pretty, but it works. And when you drop the fuse in there, it clears that, and it'll clear the battery cable. So that'll work out perfect. So now that it's all ready to go, we got, that was a 10 mil, 10 mil, 13, and 10. So everything is torqued down. We're going to connect the battery cable here and route it down and around across that engine harness there, tied in with zip ties, and then come up to that second block over there. First thing we're doing is when we tie into this side and route it, we're going to tape the other end up so it doesn't make contact with anything and spark out, because right here, this is replaceable, but in this brick right here, because they're all spot welded and mounted there, if any of this trips out or goes and grounds out, you replace the whole block. So this whole fuse block has to be replaced. You can't just replace individual fuses on these. On this side right here, this battery cable end is definitely too wide for that little slot. So we're going to have to take our cutters and cut these tabs out right there to be able to access our 175 amp fuse. I will note this is just a normal straight connection. I just worked it to give it a nice 90-degree bend, so it will fit with the cover and come out just nicely. There it is, trimmed out. Nothing super fancy, but it will do the job and allow the battery cable to get in there. As you can see, we're tied in the 175 amp fuse here. We make the corner go around, and then we're following up all the old harness, zip tied up in there right into the primary fuse box. So the wiring is all done. It's all secured. All that's left to do is put on the cover, because the cover does not come with a fuse block. You have to buy that separately. Sit there, snap it on there nice and tight, and now that is done. So now we have officially completed our second battery install. So that is the install of the second battery kit on this 2024 Chevrolet Silverado. So be sure to like the video, comment, tell us what you think, tell us what else you want to hear about, and subscribe. We got a lot of great content coming, a lot more great content already on the channel, so be sure to have a great adventure.